Today on Cracked Open, I'm sitting down with Pastor Brian Dube. We're talking about faith, grief, and how people rebuild when life doesn't turn out the way they planned. This one matters. This one is real. Hi, this is Cracked Open with Glenn Nunes, and today I'm sitting down with my pastor, actually, Brian Dube. He's going to have an interesting story for you, and about redemption, about faith, about healing, about a lot of things. But I'm just going to introduce, I don't want to talk too much in the introduction, but I'm just going to introduce him. This is Pastor Brian Dube right here.
How you doing,
Brian?
It's good to be here with you, man. This is
Great.
This is the real deal. You got the mugs. You got this is good, man.
This
I
is
like
the
it.
mugs. You get to take that mug with you too.
Well, that's good. This is awesome, man. Plus, we've been friends for how long? I was trying to think about it. 25 years.
It's been a long time.
20 years, yeah. That's amazing.
You know, it was in my notes too to talk about this. We sat down at the lake
That's right.
about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I talked about this in one of my podcasts about some people never even talk
Right.
to their pastors or their
Yeah.
ministers or whatever church
Yeah.
they go to, and it's kind of sad. You know,
And I knew your story from the point we met forward, but I didn't know the past. And so, after 20 years to sit down and get to know you more, it was awesome.
right? It was
Yeah,
cool
it was
sitting on the
great.
lake in Long Pond and the
right.
boat ramp. And
Man.
it was great. But I told you the story once how I actually found South Coast Community Church.
Right.
This kid, his dad was into politics. I was kind of getting into politics at the time, and there was a senator from Texas, Rick Perry, I think, and they had an article that said "Don't mess with Texas." And I had this article, this magazine, and I wanted his father loved this guy, so I said, "Hey, I got this magazine I want to give you." And Justin, his name was Justin. He said, "Oh yeah." He says, "Well, I got something for you." Because he knew I had left the church. I hadn't gone to church in a while. I was kind of sniffing around. And so he came over, and I gave him the book. And it's Rick Perry on the front. I says, "Give this to your dad." And he's like, "Oh, that's really cool." So he gives me this newspaper, and it's your face.
Oh, no kidding.
The whole page.
Yeah.
This guy, Brian, I didn't know you. I'm like, "What's
Yeah.
this?" He goes, "Read. It's an article. I want you to read it." And it was,
Yeah.
remember that story?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
They did that
I
story
do,
on
right,
you, and I
yeah.
read it, and
Yeah.
I was like, and you guys were in Marion at the time. That's how
Right.
long ago this was.
Yeah, that was the beginning. That was the very beginning.
Beginning.
And that was 20 years ago. Yeah,
And you know what's crazy? I showed up, and I remember my first time I walked, the church I had left was the same. It was in a hall like that, like a gym.
Yeah.
It was almost, I was like, this is weird. And I walked in, the first person walked up to me was Gary White.
Yeah,
It was
there you go.
incredible. And I
Yeah.
used to say, "Hey, I'm
He's
Gary."
still
Like,
doing that today, at least, yeah.
And
that guy, your friend that gave you that just goes to show you never know when you invite somebody, a casual conversation, what's going to happen with that. So that's so good to hear, man.
and then Gary, then I always started going back and I always go talk to Gary. He's the guy that approached me.
He's the guy.
And here I am all these years later,
Yeah, right.
still watching you speak.
Yeah, man. Well, it's been amazing to be part of the journey. What God does with a life surrendered, really, is what it is.
Yeah, so you've been through you've had
A little bit.
Speaking of journeys,
Yeah.
let's go back.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you because of the going to church and hearing the sermons, and I hear a lot of your story. But a lot of people don't know Brian Dube from you. You can talk about you had a great life. Great dad, and-
Yeah. So I grew up in a Acushnet. I still live there. I've lived there my whole life. I'm married a girl who's from Acushnet. She's lived there her whole life, and grew up. Went to St. Francis, was like a private Catholic school. So I was very sheltered. My parents were both hardworking. My dad worked at Mars Donuts as a baker. My mother worked at Shaw's, and so blue collar family. But both my mother and father had bigger families, and they didn't really have much. So they really tried to give my sister and I a good life. And so we grew up hanging out with our cousins and, aunts and uncles around. And it was a really great childhood, good schools. My parents were together until my dad passed. And so, just really had a great time as a young man of the family, even though at the same time, I was starting to feel like isolated. I had trouble making friends. People would make fun of me. I didn't really fit in. And so that's only relevant because I think years later, when I moved to high school, you go from a private Christian school to New Bedford High School, 3,000 kids, and that was an intimidating thing. And I think trying to fit in there that any insecurities I had were exacerbated. And so of course, that's going to set the stage for an addiction and then that part of the story. But even though I had, a healthy family, even though I had a great upbringing, good school, I was pretty smart, I still, had that kind of void. Just felt like I wasn't enough. And so that's going to end up being real relevant, right? Mm-hmm. But, yeah.
And then you went on, you were actually a police officer.
I was, yeah, for a quick minute. I was just there the other day at the station saying hi, and had to get some fingerprints done. But no, yeah, for in 95, 96, for a couple of years, I worked with the Acushnet Police. I'm an IT guy. I actually, when I left the police department, immediately got into IT around there. And so that was, but yeah, that was another part of the journey. And, I was partying, drinking too much, and that had a lot to do with my leaving there, and even that, thinking, oh man, another mess up, this is the end. And then, of course, it's, I said once, preaching, just kind of all of a sudden, we don't surrender to be done, we surrender to begin. Because a lot of times when we're like, that's it, I'm done.
Right.
It's like God, we open ourselves to other people, we open ourselves to God, and it's like, what we try to do often, we can't alone, right? So
I'm kind of glad you didn't make it as a police officer.
Right, yeah. I've heard that before. Yeah.
But so let's fast forward a little bit. Then, this isn't a perfect road, obviously.
Yeah,
it's been tough.
Right,
and then we hit the addiction stage.
So my dad, I never saw my father have a beer ever in my life because his uncles, his brothers, my uncles, and his dad were alcoholics. And so he grew up seeing that and really tried to isolate me from that. He did his best, but I immediately remember being maybe 17, 18 and drinking. I remember the first time getting drunk, and I remember thinking like this is it, man. Like this is perfect. Like any inhibition, and I was a happy drunk. I wasn't a guy starting fights. I was a guy buying drinks over in the bar. But what it did was it gave me that sense of community and belonging that I wanted. And so for the first time, I wasn't really insecure. And then, I started to get known as, a party animal and these kinds of things. And I was in that crowd. And, of course, eventually all the stuff you say you're never going to do, you end up doing. You say, I'm not like that guy until you're like that guy, right? And so I somehow managed to, through an alcoholism and again, I had, I tried the police department, that didn't work out with my drinking. I ended up pivoting, and I still, I ended up doing well with IT. I ended up getting married, had a couple of kids, and all at the same time, I'm trying to stay sober. I'm not, I'm not drinking. I'm not doing any drugs or anything like that. And then I got migraine headaches, and they started giving me Oxycontin. And this is back in probably, this is like, I was married, this is like 99, somewhere around there, 2000. Wow. And so, back then, it wasn't as well known as it was now. And so doctors would give you that for headaches. And so I already had a propensity toward alcoholism. I was already, what I would say, an addict. I already had that. And then now I'm given these pills. And within, I would say, within 4 years, things got so bad that if I got 90 Percocet, I would eat them all in a day.
How many?
90. I would take.
Holy
so
cow.
It's a sad thing, man. It's a crazy. But I had like a routine. Every act has a routine. And I say this, man, just because people look at me and they're like, well, it can't be that bad. It was that bad. I would buy 80 milligram Oxycontins, which is like, 16 Percocet.
Wow.
Right? Because that's 80 milligrams. I would crush that up, 2 of them, and I would snort one on either side. And that was how I started. Wow. And so it got as bad as I was doing 10 80 milligram Oxycontins a day. And I was doing that. I did that for probably 9 months, went through like 190 grand. I ended up, and I wasn't even feeling good. I was like a zombie trying to not get sick. But it was really bad. I ended up in a rehab. The first time I think was maybe like 2003. So I'd already had a good, 3-4 year run. And then, I remember back then they said, you're from Acushnet? Like, what are you doing over here? And I'm like, yeah, no, it was a mistake. It's not going to happen again, believe me. It was an oversight. And the next year I was there again, and the next year I was there again.
Wow.
And almost yearly, I couldn't get more than 30 days. And then in 2007, I ended up in Teen Challenge, which is a Brockton long-term program. That's like 13 months at the time. And I remember saying, those people are insane. I'll do 30 days. And long story short, I did 14 years. I became the director of the program for a while, worked as a pastor of the program, got my degree, really a call to, even though I did the IT stuff, I really realized, like, hey, something profound has happened to me that's changed me forever. And I can't, like, and again, like, you don't have to be a pastor, but I knew for me, like, no, I need to share this story to help other people. I can't just, and, we know a lot of our friends, they're dead. A lot of our friends aren't here.
Family, I have family members.
Yeah, right. And so to be able to be part of, instead of the problem, but part of the solution was like, yeah, man, I got to do this, right? And that's how my ministry started. I didn't think I was going to be a pastor. I just wanted to tell the story. And I knew Jesus was the center of that story. And so, people ask about ministry. I'm like, look, I'm a guy who loves Jesus, and I love people, and I want people to love Jesus. It's not really that complicated, right?
And getting back to what you were saying about when it was bad, it was bad. I've heard a lot of the stories because I've known you all these years. Yeah. But I remember, like we were talking off the record when we were saying how sometimes you say things to people and it sticks with you, whatever. I remember one of the, I believe it was during a sermon, you spoke about one incident where you were home and you were leaving to go, do your drugs, and your wife is literally hanging onto your legs, and the kids were crying, "Don't leave!" And you almost forced them and pushed them off and shut that door and went out. And that's how bad it was. I was like, "Wow!"
Probably my worst memory, and that's why I've shared that. As I remember, I was just getting sick. I mean, at that point, I wasn't getting high. Like, I was just trying to not be sick, and so. My kids were little, and I remember, I mean, it's a horrible scene. I remember it like it was yesterday. And in my kitchen, in my old house, my wife was on the floor, kind of kneeled in the corner with the two kids, holding out the ATM card, but at the same time begging me, like, just don't go. Wow. And I looked at her, and I'm like, I can't, I have to, And I remember that, like, you get this self-loathing of, like, I hate that guy. I hate the guy that would do that. And then that's how I realized how powerful that addiction is. And again, we're responsible, right? We're responsible to say we need help, but man, that's what drugs do, right? I'm not that guy. It's hard to imagine being that guy. I would, die for my family, right. But that's what drugs do. They rob you of who you are,
Well, I just wanted to bring that up because that's letting people really know, like the person who's listening or watching this right now, say, oh, this guy's a pastor. Like, how bad really was it?
Seen anything.
It was pretty bad. Yeah. Oh yeah, I've heard some of your stories, and I go, wow, it's incredible where you are now. But I've had my own, dark side. I never was that bad, but I've had bad points in my life too. Like, I've been down in the dumps. You probably told you a few of them.
Yeah.
But now here you are. Yeah. You're at the pulpit now. It's incredible, like where you've come from, and obviously we all know it's all through God. We talked about this in my car that day.
That's
how
right.
like I really haven't shared my testimony like I have in the past, but it was God who got me to this in this seat right here.
Right, yeah.
And I could have easily went down a wrong path, but I didn't, and I was moved, and we know it's God's Spirit. That's the only way. I have no other logical explanation of what happened to me.
Yeah.
I've witnessed these I call them miracles. I told you about a couple of them, and to me those are miracles. I don't care what anybody says. It just doesn't happen. Right. Like, it's not a movie. It really happens.
And the difference it makes, and I've experienced this in my own life. I've seen it as a counselor. Is that people who are surrounded by other people and have really healthy relationships will survive and overcome struggles and trials at a much different level than people who are alone. And I think struggle tends to isolate people, which is the worst thing. And I've always had, and I say this and people think it just sounds good, but I've been surrounded by people better than me my entire life. And I mean that. I mean, That's absolutely true, and that's made the difference.
Yeah.
Because when people were checked out, my people checked in. You know what I mean? And we'll talk about that with my illness, but yeah, it's amazing the difference of what God does and how He does it is through the people we love.
Mm-hmm. It's funny when I was telling people I was going to start doing a couple of live ones like this, with guests, and when I do the, they can put a face to the voice, but. I told people, I'm having my pastor come here. Like, he's like, oh, what are you going to talk about? I said, I don't know. I said, we're not scripting it. We're going to go. Right. And they're like, wow, you got guts. You're just going to bring a pastor and then talk about, I said, yeah. I said, it's not going to be what you think.
Yeah.
But, I knew it was going to go good, because the history and knowing what you've been through and where you've come and watching this. But by the way, I don't know if it's because of me. I've had a tough year. I haven't really talked to you a lot recently, but I had a tough year. I had a good year going, and then it just fell apart. I've had like one thing after the next happen, and but when I first started coming back, because I left the church for a little while, I was obviously playing in the band and I left for my own personal reasons. It had nothing to do with the church. And then when I finally went back, I was like, I got to get back. I was talking to a couple of people that were still going, and I think when I first went back, I think we were on. I think it might have been during like the Acts part when you talk about Acts a lot.
Right.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, not even getting. I'm just kind of in a fog. I'm still going every week. And I was just like, and I was like struggling. And I'm like, I'm not even hearing anything. What is wrong with me? I'm praying. I'm going to church crying and praying as I'm sitting here because I'm like, God, help me here, Yeah. But recently, I don't know what changed, but man, the last few sermons, like, you've been on fire, man. Yeah. Like on fire. I mean, you know how it seems like the sermon's speaking to you, but lately it's just been like, woof.
We have
like 4 or 5 weeks in a row, they've been unbelievable.
We have Adriana, who's like a sweet old Italian woman, and as I leave the church, she says, Pastor Brian, 3 weeks ago I said, that's the best sermon ever. Then last week I said, that's the best sermon ever. Now this week, this is the best one. I said, you're setting me up to fail. No, it's the Spirit of God. Look, the reality is that I'm talking to people from a place of suffering right now, right? It's not, things aren't,
I love what David said to you.
Outside.
I think he said it when he was making announcements. He said, a great sermon. You said, no, great Savior.
That's it. That's it. Really it is. Yeah, taste and see that God is good. I mean, that's the message.
Yeah, so let's move along here. So obviously, you made it through your addiction. You're on the pulpit. Everything's going good. You got the wife, the kids, and then bam.
And then bam, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I'm online one day, and I'm like, what is going on here? And I talked about it in one of my podcasts, and I have it here. How do you pronounce it?
It's Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Okay.
It's a French Guillain and then Barré syndrome. GBS is what most people call it, GBS. And yeah, I mean, I can kind of talk about how it happened and. Yeah, so go ahead, yeah.
Well, I'm trying to look here. I had it and I was going to ask you that, like, the moment that this happened, when you were like realized, you're in trouble. I mean, did you pass out or what?
So November 19th of 2023 was sort of the day I ended up going to the ER. So the day before that, I had a respiratory infection for about 3 weeks. So I had sinusitis, I had bronchitis, I was stuffed up, I couldn't hear out of one ear, just a really bad sort of cold. And I didn't really think much of it, and I was starting to get weak. So I went to the ER, they gave me antibiotics, I went home. This was on the 18th. And so now, the morning of the 19th, I got tingling in my fingers and my face starts drooping. So now I'm thinking maybe my wife was thinking I was having a stroke, and I was trying to not think that. I didn't want to worry her, so I said, no, it's probably Bell's palsy. But I was concerned, so I went back to the ER, and then they did some tests, and they said, you're not having a stroke, and they actually discharged me. And this is important. And
Discharged you?
I was discharged. They thought, it was Bell's palsy. Usually GBS presents with your legs, not with your hands. However, I say this to tell people that, trust your own body. Like the doctors are the experts. They're not going to catch everything. And if I hadn't spoken up, you'll see in the story, I wouldn't be here. And so the fact that the doctors, kind of missed it, I said to the nurses, no, look, those guys need to come back here. Something's really wrong. By that time, I was having trouble holding my head up.
Wow.
And I was having trouble holding my arm. I was having trouble swallowing. And so now I'm like, okay, something's really wrong. So they decided to send me by ambulance. They said either Rhode Island or Boston. We picked Rhode Island. And so they sent me by ambulance to Rhode Island Hospital. And by the time I got there, my throat was almost completely collapsed. So I was holding a straw with this hand to try to take the suction out of the fluid because I couldn't swallow anymore. I was essentially drowning on my own saliva. And so they rolled me in a room with two guys. At this point, I couldn't really communicate. And they said to me, we need to intubate you. You're losing the ability to breathe. And they said, this other doctor is going to be the witness. They said, if anything happens, do you want us to resuscitate you? And I just kind of did this. And I remember just kind of praying and thinking like, okay, I'm 50 years old. I mean, I've had a great life, but I don't want to go yet. I got kids I love. I got a ministry. I got friends and I remember kind of thinking like 50 years, like this is it, huh? 50 years. And but I did say in my prayer, I said, but you know, God, if this is it for me, boy, I said, I want my last prayer on this earth to be one of gratitude. And so if this is it, I want to say thank you for the life you've given me. Thank you for rescuing me from addiction. Thank you for my wife and my kids. And if this is it, I just pray that you draw people to you, that my kids, and that was it. I closed my eyes. And I didn't know if I was going to open them again. So I did, and when I did, I was in an MRI machine. I don't think I was supposed to wake up during this. I'm pretty sure I wasn't. But I woke up in an MRI machine, and I could only move my right eye and my feet. I was completely paralyzed. So I kind of started thinking, well, I'm alive, so that's like, kind of took a minute to go, okay, I'm alive, so that's good, but I can't move, and so I don't know what's happening. And then the next thing I remember after that was waking up in the hospital room. I had 2 tubes going down my throat to help me breathe. I had 6 lines coming out of my neck, my carotid artery to give me meds to feed me. I had a feeding tube like up my nose, and I couldn't move. Just my feet and my eye. My wife was there. I remember my daughter there shortly after. And the way they would communicate with me is they'd say, move your foot up and down for yes, and move your foot side to side for no. And so they would ask me questions, and I'd say yes and no. And 24 hours before this, I was just a guy with a bad cold. And so it was kind of hard to be like, wait a minute. Wow. And for the first few days, they didn't know what it was. So they did all kind of tests. Actually, this is a crazy story, but they actually wanted to treat me for botulism because they didn't know if it was some kind of poisoning. So the CDC, true story, you can ask my wife, the CDC flew in on a helicopter with this suitcase. I thought it was like I was Spider-Man or something. Wow. And they treated me with this poison. They could have killed me, but they weren't sure what was happening. And they treated me with this stuff. My wife had to have a thing. And after, I think on the 3rd day, they had done a spinal tap, and they determined I had Guillain-Barré syndrome. And they, at that point, told us that it was going to be a long road, long meaning years, not like a month or 2, but like a year or 2. Wow. And so that's, so I just hit on November 19th of 2025, I just hit the 2-year mark. But yeah.
So look at you.
It's great. Yeah, I'm getting better, I'm getting better. I'm feeling stronger, but still have, I have limitations with my hands. With my fingers and my face. My lip is partly paralyzed, which affects my speech a little bit. But I am, you can heal. My neurologist says, because I kind of tell him, listen, just don't sugarcoat it. Give me the real, just tell me. And he said, your case is the worst I've ever heard of. He said, but your recovery has been remarkable. Wow. And he said, so my prognosis is as long as you continue to see recovery, you'll continue to see recovery. He said, when we get to the point where we see a couple months with nothing, but I haven't seen that. Week by week, I still see recovery.
Wow, I'm kind of blown away. I knew a lot of this, but I'm glad we're here talking about this. But when you're talking about the prayer that you were, I had tears in my eyes over here when you were talking about the prayer. I'm like, it's like Job. You're like the modern Job. Like most people would have been like, angry but you went to gratitude. That's pretty powerful.
And this is kind of crazy, right? The story. But so I was halfway through my doctorate, and what my focus, my field of study is apologetics. Apologetics is the defense that God is real. Now, the biggest obstacle to belief in God, there's a pastor, John Ortberg, and he said this once. He said, if you ask people who don't believe in God, the number one reason they don't believe in God, they'll tell you suffering. He said, if you ask people who believe in God, when they grew most in their faith, they'll tell you suffering. So my field of study, what I was particularly interested in, is the idea that there's a good God, and yet human suffering is real. I think that is the question to answer. So here I am now. I'm halfway through my doctorate. I literally have a book on my desk open discussing particularly sickness, and I find myself paralyzed in a hospital bed.
Wow. And
I remember thinking to myself, well, we're really going to explore this in every way. This is not an abstract concept. This is not for the classroom. I am suffering.
Right.
And I'm going to explore. And so I'm writing a book about it. It's a struggle with my fingers, but it's really to tell that story, to say, hey, in my experience, here's what I've learned.
Wow. Hey, it's crazy. We didn't skip over this, but I forgot to tell people, like, you're an atheist. You were an atheist
too.
too.
No, I didn't believe.
We kind of
Catholic school did that to me, man.
We kind of skipped over that.
The result of 9 years. So kindergarten through 8th grade. My parents sent me to a Catholic school. Then I found out my dad was an atheist, and I was like, what did you send me? What, are you just trying to torture me? You don't even believe in God? And then I remember he said to me, I thought it'd be good for you. And I remember, even as a kid, I remember he said, if it's true, it might be good for everybody. But if it's not true, it's not good for anybody. And that's the way I had thought about it. And so, I went through my high school years, early college years, completely as an atheist. I thought it was nonsense. And I was wrong. I was very wrong, and I know that in every way you can.
You talk about that, chased everything.
Yeah, and like I tell people too, I had integrity as an atheist. So in my view, you increase pleasure and you minimize pain. That's a logical outflow. You can't get ethics from atheism. You get nihilism, but it's okay. You just enjoy yourself. Like that makes sense. Mm-hmm. People who try to hijack ethics into atheism, you can't do it. Now, I'm not saying, when people say, well, so you need God to be good, you need God to even know what good is. So yes, you need God. But, but I was coming from that perspective. And the thing is that before existentially, it caused issues in, again, in my own sort of inner life. Externally, it wasn't working. I didn't feel, I wanted to feel like somebody loved me, like I mattered. I wanted to feel significant. I wanted to feel me. I wanted to be loved, right? So I didn't feel that. Drugs didn't give me that. The barroom didn't give me that. The friends, I have good relationships, but the girls, all that it didn't give me that. It didn't do what it was supposed to do, and lies are like that, right? So before somebody told me it was a lie, I knew it was a lie. It stopped working, and so I get this young kid now, I'm on the police department. I'm trying to reconcile these worlds. And actually, I remember working a midnight tape on the desk, reading Mere Christianity, and feeling like some of those boulders of faith, of obstacles of faith, had been removed. Wow. Not that I would have said at that point as a Christian, but I started to realize the things I had held on to deny God's existence, it didn't work in real life, right? And so God had been working on me at that time. But if you would have told me, oh yeah, you're going to be a pastor someday, I'm like, I'm not even a good human. Like I'm not, right? I'm not. That's not going to happen, man. I'm a selfish guy, right? And still, you got to fight against that. But what God has done in my life has been it's
an incredible story.
Yeah, it's a crazy story.
Pleasure having you here today.
Yeah,
it has
man.
a pleasure getting to know you, and I love you like a brother.
I love you too, man. No, this is awesome.
And it's great. Like podcasts are great now, and like especially like you're a pastor. That's how people, they don't,
Yeah,
you're an
right.
everyday guy though.
Yeah,
People
yeah,
don't realize
right.
that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
formats like this, it's good because you can get
Yeah,
out there
you
and
get
people
to
can
know
hear the
people.
word and
Right.
hear your testimony and see that you're a regular, and hey, maybe they'll come to our church.
Hey,
right?
listen, I remember someone coming up to me after a sermon one day, and they said, "You know what I like about you? You are such an ordinary guy." And I was like, "Yeah, thanks, you know." And they're like, "Yeah, there's nothing special about you at all." I was like, "Yeah, no, I get what you're
Let's not
saying."
push
And
it.
they're like, "Yeah, you're just like," I'm like, "Okay, I get it. No. But hey, that's, you know, I don't know. We're all just doing our best to live, you know, with our struggles, man. And we got to help each other out, and we got to, you know, if you overcome, you got to invite others into that, you know.
So as we close this, guess we touched a lot. I kind of touched everything we wanted to touch
It's a
on.
lot,
I think.
right? Well,
there
we
anything
can do it
left?
again, man.
Anything left?
No,
here?
I mean, listen, I'll just leave it with this. This is my pastor piece. You know, David said this, and when I preach, I say this a lot. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And here's where that's everything to me. I can share my story. I can tell people that God is good, but God is real, and he wants you to encounter him. Not believe as an idea. God is good, and he wants to encounter. So I want people, and listen, I say that as a guy who's completely paralyzed in a hospital bed and prayed for God's presence. And God is good. Mm-hmm. And the Bible says, draw near to him and he'll draw near to you. So my prayer, I mean, really, is that people would taste and see for themselves. Like, don't take my word for it, but whatever you're searching for, man, God is there. He's for us, and he loves us. And so, man, I love you, but thank you so much.
Hey, as we close out, one question.
Yes,
Two-part.
sir. All right.
So the person like me who does have faith, and I believe
Yeah.
it's my go-to, I always talk about it. And then you get people, maybe not an atheist, but the person
Not sure.
Not sure.
Yeah.
So someone like me, say you're speaking to me now, if we're one-on-one at your house, and I say, "Hey, Brian, I'm I'm having some issues and not doubting my faith, but whatever." What would you say to someone like me to encourage me and maybe the everyday average Joe out there?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is, you know, a lot of times when people talk about, oh, you know, I don't know how to talk to somebody, listen, everyone's got a story. And so as we sit down and I'm going to say, what's going on with you, man? You know, you tell me what's going on with you. And as we talk and tell stories to each other, and we talk about, hey, let me tell you my experience, what I'm going through, you're going to relate to pieces of that. And rather than come from like, okay, I'm going to just pray for you. How about we just share what's going on? I can tell you what God's doing in my life. I can try and encourage you. And then, yeah, I can pray for you, you know. But, you know, as far as doubt and as far as, you know, the reason it's faith is because we got to walk in it. We got to exercise it. And sometimes our faith is really strong. And sometimes our faith is really weak. God's existence doesn't depend on whether or not, you know, there's a joke I say is, you know, man was created in God's image. And we've been trying to repay him the favor ever since, right? But yeah, so I would tell people, like, I think we beat ourselves up a lot. You know, I think when we have bad days, you know, it's like you can tell God you don't believe in him. You know, I joke with you. I said, yeah, about 8th or 9th grade, I told God he didn't exist anymore. I don't know who I was talking to, but I told somebody. And that's it, right? I mean, look, when people tell me, you know, I don't believe in God, I say, well, he believes in you. And that's my experience.
I love one of the stories you said about, I think it was a guy in Teen Challenge when you were the director over there. Or you were the director, right? Is that what you were?
I did all kind of stuff.
Well, you were there, and some guy was there complaining, or whatever, and you asked him, "How's your prayer life?"
Yeah.
Hey, that sticks in my head because I always say, but I've been praying a lot, but
Yeah.
when it seems like when you don't, that's when.
And it's like, look, I mean, we believe God's personal, right? So it's just talking to God. Like if you want a healthy relationship with anybody, there's got to be communication. And so we take time, we separate ourselves from all the chaos, from our phones, and we you know, just connect, listen to that still small voice, and then we're in a place to now give out to other people. Because look, man, everything takes. And the minute you show up and you're willing to kind of give a little to somebody, it changes their world. Like, hey, that guy showed you an article, and here we are sitting here. Like, you just don't know what God's going to do.
Right. But it was a great conversation. I thought we're going to do it again, hopefully a follow-up.
Love to, yeah.
And this has been Cracked Open with my pastor, Brian Dube. You just heard his whole story, and not all of it, but a lot of it. And we touched on, I think we touched on mostly what we wanted to and get the word out there. But I always say it when I end the podcast, I always say, treat your neighbor as yourself. I always kind of say that. So kind of linked into everything.
That's right,
Bottom line is you got to be there for each other, right?
Show up.
And so anyway, we're going to close this out. I think it was a great conversation. This is my pastor and Brian Dube, and we'll see you next time on Cracked Open. Take care of yourself.